I never expected my uncle to show up that evening. It had been years since I last saw him. He was the kind of relative who drifted in and out of family gatherings, always carrying a quiet presence, never overstaying his welcome. But there he was, standing at my doorstep, his eyes scanning me with that same unreadable look. "Didn't know you were in town," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "Didn't plan to be," he replied, setting down a small duffel bag. "Just passing through." My partner was out for the evening, which made his arrival feel even more unexpected. He walked into the living room, glancing at the framed photos on the shelf, pictures of me and my partner, moments captured in still perfection. His gaze lingered longer than I liked. "You happy?" he asked suddenly, his voice carrying something more than curiosity. The question caught me off guard. "Of course," I answered too quickly. He gave a slow nod, but I could tell he didn't believe me. Maybe I didn't believe myself either. Lately, things between my partner and me had settled into something predictable. We still laughed, still talked, but something was missing, something unspoken yet undeniable. I offered him a drink, and we sat in the dimly lit room, exchanging small talk. He spoke about his travels, the places he had been, the people he had met. His stories made me restless. There was a world outside my structured life, a world I had once craved but somehow let slip away. My phone buzzed on the table, and my heart jolted. A name flashed on the screen, one I shouldn't have been so eager to see. I hesitated before picking it up, my uncle watching in silence as I tapped out a quick reply. "Old friend?" he asked. "Something like that." His eyes held mine for a moment, and in that brief silence, it felt like he knew more than he should. I changed the subject, steering the conversation away from anything personal. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that his arrival wasn't just a coincidence. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe it was fate. Or maybe it was just bad timing. Either way, something had shifted. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to face what came next. The moment my partner left, I felt the weight of my choices settle on me. I had told myself it was nothing, a distraction, a harmless indulgence, but deep down I knew that was a lie. A single message was all it took. "You alone?" I hesitated for a second before typing, "Yeah, come over." Minutes later, there was a knock at the door. My pulse quickened as I opened it, letting them in without a word. There was no need for pleasantries, no hesitation. We had crossed that line long ago, and now, standing in the dim glow of my living room, we both knew why we were here. It started slow, fingertips grazing, eyes locking with unspoken understanding. The kind of moment where guilt and desire tangled into something indistinguishable. A part of me screamed to stop, to walk away, to undo everything that had led to this. But another part, the one that had been starved for something new, something forbidden, ignored the warning. Their breath was warm against my skin, their touch familiar despite the secrecy. Every move felt deliberate, as if we were testing the limits of how far we could go before regret kicked in. But regret never came. Not then. For a while nothing else existed. Not my partner. Not my life outside of this moment. Just this. Just them. Then, in the silence that followed, reality crept back in. My mind raced ahead to the consequences, the lies that would need to be told, the damage I couldn't take back. I wanted to pretend it didn't matter, that it was just another night, another secret tucked away. But then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. Time stopped. A wave of cold panic shot through me as I scrambled to make sense of what was happening. The door hadn't been locked. I hadn't been careful. And now he was here. My old uncle stepped inside. His footsteps slow and deliberate. He wasn't supposed to be back yet. He wasn't supposed to see this. For a second I thought maybe, just maybe, he hadn't noticed. Maybe he was just passing through to grab something from his bag, oblivious to the tension thick in the air. But then his gaze lifted, settling on us. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just looked. My pulse pounded in my ears. I couldn't tell if he was angry, disgusted, or something else entirely. His expression was unreadable, but his silence was deafening. I felt them beside me, rigid, breath held, just as trapped as I was. It would have almost been easier if he had yelled, demanded answers, threatened to tell my partner. But he didn't. He just stood there, eyes heavy with something I couldn't place. Seconds stretched into eternity. My mind scrambled for an excuse, a lie, anything that could undo what he had just seen. But there was nothing. Then, without a word, he turned, walked past us, headed straight for the kitchen. Cupboard opened. A glass clinked against the counter. The sound of water pouring filled the silence. I swallowed hard, waiting, dreading. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, measured. "You know," he said, setting the glass down, "I once knew a man who thought secrets like these could stay buried." He took a sip, then looked at me with something almost resembling pity. He was wrong. A chill ran down my spine. He wasn't talking about some distant story. This was a warning. My throat felt dry. "Are you going to?" He cut me off with a slow shake of his head. "Not my business." Relief should have washed over me, but it didn't. Because it wasn't that simple. He knew. And now, the question wasn't if he would tell. It was when. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. Unshaken, unreadable. He hadn't threatened me, hadn't confronted me outright, but that only made it worse. His silence was a weight pressing down on my chest, making it impossible to breathe. By morning, I half expected my partner to wake up with the truth already spilled, for everything to come crashing down. But nothing happened. My uncle sat at the kitchen table, drinking his coffee like it was just another day. He barely acknowledged me as I poured my own cup, my hands unsteady. I wanted to ask him what he was thinking, what he planned to do. But I already knew he wouldn't answer. Instead, I tried to act normal. Forced small talk, pretended everything was fine. My partner kissed my cheek as they grabbed their keys, oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. The door shut behind them, and suddenly it was just me and him. He didn't speak right away, just stirred his coffee slowly, watching me with that same knowing look. "You scared?" he finally asked. I let out a hollow laugh. "Should I be?" He shrugged. "That depends." I gripped the edge of the counter. "Are you going to tell?" He sighed, setting his mug down. "Not my place to ruin your life." Then after a beat he added, "You'll do that on your own." His words cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to defend myself, to justify what I had done, but I couldn't. There was nothing to say that he didn't already know. He pushed back his chair and stood, stretching like he had all the time in the world. "You know," he said, glancing toward the door, "secrets don't stay secrets forever. Sooner or later, the truth has a way of slipping out." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Then he grabbed his bag and walked toward the door. Before stepping out, he paused. "You should think about what you're going to do next." And with that, he was gone. I stood there, the weight of his words settling over me. 'Cause he was right. The question wasn't if the truth would come out. It was whether I'd be the one to tell it, or if someone else would do it for me.